Hi everyone, it's Blake with FicheBait. In this video, we're going to walk through how to configure SAML authentication with Okta and Laserfiche Directory Server. If your organization uses Okta authentication, this will allow you to use that same authentication within Laserfiche, so your users can have a familiar login experience across your organization's apps. Let's get started. Alright, so to start with, we are going to go to Okta. You can see here that I'm already logged into my Okta account. On the left-hand side, we're going to go to Applications, and then select Applications underneath of that. Next, we'll click on the Create App Integration, and we'll select SAML 2.0, and click Next. And the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to ask us to name the app that we're going to create within Okta. So this shows up within Okta. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and name it SSO Laserfiche. You can add a logo if you want to. I just happen to have a Laserfiche logo on my desktop. I will select that. It will upload it. We'll go ahead and click Apply, and then Next. On the Configure SAML page, it asks for several different pieces of information. So before we actually enter any of that in, let's go to Laserfiche Directory Server and let's talk about a few different things within there that we'll want to know about and have set up beforehand. So in Directory Server, you can see I'm in Settings and on the General tab. And if we scroll down a little, you'll notice that there's a SAML Login Configuration section. The first value is called the default landing page. And what this is if you have a user that were to authenticate to Laserfiche using the SAML identity provider, this is the URL that they would then be taken to after they do that. So in my case, I have it configured to go to Forms. You can choose web link or the web client if you want to. And next we have the custom SAML entity ID. This is how Directory Server identifies itself to the SAML identity provider. You can see here that by default, it uses this ID. And so I've basically just taken that and put it in and replaced the Directory Server host name with my server name. And then you can save that. And I'll show you where this comes into play here in a little bit. Next, we'll want to go to STS sites. And in STS sites, you'll want to make sure that you have a site set up for your directory server. And you'll basically follow this type of an outline. There is documentation on how to do this as well. But you'll also want to have an STS site per LFDS STS that you have installed that people would be authenticating to and then, accessing and then authenticating using Okta. In this case, in order to get into Laserfiche. These different endpoints and stuff are used with your SAML identity provider. And it's basically a way to say that this endpoint or this STS site has permission to be able to use this application and authenticate the users. So you'll want to make sure that you have all that ready. I'm going to go ahead and copy this SAML endpoint, because that is the first piece of information that we're going to need. And let's go ahead and jump back over here to Okta. So as I said, the first piece of information that we need is the single sign-on URL, and that is that SSO endpoint that we'll need. So we'll just paste that in there. The next thing is the audience URI. So this is back on the General tab of Directory Server. This is the custom SAML entity ID. So I will go ahead and copy that and we will paste that in. If you are wondering, it is best practice to set this. It can make migrating servers and things easier in the future if you ever migrate Directory Server. So it's best practice to go ahead and set that and have it saved. Okay, so from there, if we had multiple STS sites, we can go to Show Advanced Settings, and then underneath Other Requestable SSO URLs, this is where you would add those other STS sites. And again, this is a way for you to tell Okta that, hey, these other STS sites have the ability or the right in order to use this app to authenticate users with. So we're going to go ahead and scroll past that since we don't have anything. And the next part that we're going to go to is the attribute statements. So the attribute statements are used within Directory Server for the account information. So if I were to come in here and if I look at Anna admin and go to profile, you'll notice that we have different information about Anna. In this case, it all comes from Active Directory. Since we're not using Active Directory, we need to tell Okta how to send that information and what information to send. And so that's where the attribute statements come from, is we need to tell it that information. So we're going to go ahead and enter a few pieces of information here. So the first thing that I'm going to add is the first name. On the value, we'll do the drop down. You can see that we have first name here. So I'll go ahead and select that. We'll do last name, email, and we'll do department. You'll notice that for department in the drop down, there isn't a department listed. You can click into the field and you can freehand type a value as well. There are lots of different values that you can use. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to learn more here and you can learn what a lot of those different attributes are that you can use. Next, we'll do display name. This is another one that doesn't show in the dropdown. And then last, we have title, and same thing, it's not in the dropdown, so we'll just type it in. Okay, once we have that, we're going to go ahead and scroll down here. That's all we need to do on this part. We'll hit next. And on this page, this is just a feedback form. We're just going to skip it and click finish. And that will bring us back to our application that we just configured. So from here, there's two pieces of information that we need. So the first is the metadata details. We aren't able just to download the metadata file. So we need to click on copy, and then we can go and paste that into our browser, and that will give us our metadata file. From here, we can just copy the value. We can open something like Notepad, and then we can say save as. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and name mine Okta IDP metadata, and we want to give it the XML extension, and we'll save that. Once we have that, if we scroll down a little further, we're going to go to SAML signing certificates. From here, you'll notice that I have two different certificates. One is inactive and the other one's active. You might have an inactive one as well. But we want to go to the active one, click on Actions, and then click Download Certificate. So that will download the certificate here. And at that point, we are basically done on the Okta side for now. We'll come back and do one more thing here in a little bit. But next, we're going to go to Directory Server. And in Directory Server, we now need to add Okta as an identity provider within Directory Server. So we'll go to Settings, we'll click the Identity Providers tab, and then to the right, we'll click Add Identity Provider. The first thing that we need to do is give it a name. So I'm just going to name mine Okta. What type of identity provider are we using? We're going to use a SAML identity provider. We're going to leave host empty, and then we're going to enable the SAML authentication. If you scroll down a little, you'll notice that there's a few different fields here that need some information. Luckily, we don't need to enter this manually because of the metadata that we just exported. So we'll click the little folder icon. We are going to go to our downloads folder, and here's that XML file of the metadata that we just downloaded. So I'm going to select that and click Open, and then click Import Metadata. As soon as we do that, you'll notice that the issuer, endpoint, and endpoint binding types are all populated for us, and we don't have to do anything there. There are other options down here. We're not going to cover that in this video. I'll have another video for that later on, but you're welcome to read up on that and learn about it if you want to. So from here we can click Save, and you'll be taken back to the main identity providers tab. More than likely you'll be taken back to the first identity provider in your list. So let's go ahead and reselect Okta. We're then going to go to the Claims tab. So as I said, we want Okta to be able to send information or metadata, right, about the user that's logging in, so Directory Server has that information. So this is where we tell Directory Server which values from Okta to map where. So the first one we have here is email. That's the value that I had on the Okta side. Then we have first name, last name, department, and display name. So now that we have that, we'll go ahead and click Save. And we have our Okta identity provider set up. One other thing that we want to do is we want to go to certificates. So I have the certificate console open here. We'll want to go down to the Trusted Root Certification Authorities and the certificates folder. And if you right click on that, go to All Tasks and Import. Click Next. And we're going to browse to the certificate that we exported from Okta. More than likely, you'll have to change the type in the bottom right here, say All Files. Here's the Okta certificate that I exported earlier. Click Open. Next, make sure that it's placing it in that Trusted Root Certificate or Certification Authorities folder. We'll hit Next and Finish. By doing that, what we're doing is we're telling Directory Server that it can trust the certificate that Okta is using, right? So as it's making that handshake, using the certificates, it knows that, oh yes, I can trust this, and we can communicate together and pass information. Very similar to how other certification works within Directory Server with other services. Okay, so we have one more thing that we need to do before we log in. Well, I should say two more things. So the next thing that we need to do is I'm going to come back here to Okta, and we need to assign a user in Okta to be able to use this app. So I'm going to click on Assign, Assign to People. I'm going to choose my user. You would choose anyone that you want. You can also do groups as well. And I'll go ahead and hit Save and go back, and we'll click Done. And you can see now my user has access to the SSO Laserfiche app. From here, we are then going to go back to Directory Server, Accounts, and we need to add our Okta user to Directory Server. So we'll click on Add Users. We're going to choose SAML User. From here, we can assign it a group. Make sure that the identity provider is your Okta identity provider that you just created. Add the username, and then the unique attribute, which is the email address. Assign it the license, and everything else you can leave blank. So from here, we'll click Finish and OK. If we look at our user here, we have our licensing and our group set. And if we go to Profile, you'll notice that all this profile information is still missing. That will be populated the first time the user logs in. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and open an In Private window, and we will log in to Forms. And when we get to the LFDS STS page, down at the bottom, you'll notice that we have the SAML Okta button now. So I'll go ahead and click that. That will take us to our Okta login page. So you will log in with your Okta information. And then for my account, I use the Okta app for my code. So I will type in my code, hit verify, and it has now logged me in to Forms. You can see my name up here. If we go back to Directory Server, here's that user. If we refresh and go to the Profile tab, you can now see that my information was passed through. So that's how you were able to set up Okta as an identity provider, a SAML identity provider within Laserfiche Directory Server. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you found any tricks or anything, make sure you post those in the comments for the community to know. And as always, keep phishing.